Hey guys, we have Scott and John back. I'm not using their last names anymore. If there are three of you out there who don't know who Scott, Walter, and John Gibbs are, I encourage you to look them both up. Their information will be in the information below. This is Randy Kirk. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, after seeing what John and Scott have provided just in the last couple of weeks, you're making a huge mistake. You also need to be subscribed to John's and on his Patreon and my Patreon too. And then that's enough said about all that. We have John for about 12 minutes, and we're going to jump into this as fast as possible and let John talk first. Anyway, today, the subject matter is, will Robotaxi earn revenue before Optimus the robot? By the way, I also did a poll on whether it's what the plural of Optimus is. The winner was
what is it? What is the answer? Is it Optimi?
Well, the winner on the poll was Optimi.
Okay,
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay,
that seems correct.
And the reason why it's correct is because that's how James Dama uses it.
I see.
Right? So it is definitely correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right, John.
Okay,
you go first.
I'm going to set the parameters just a little bit to be careful, because you could already argue that FSD is making revenue because people are purchasing it. But what you're talking about is a robo-taxi ride that somebody pays $15 for and goes from point A to point B.
Exactly.
And then Optimus, you could also argue, perhaps is already making money effectively if it's doing anything if it's putting a piece from here to here, building the Model S, then it is effectively making some money, right? So Scott is agreeing with all of this stuff. So the question
separated at birth.
The question is we've talked about this too much. That's the problem. But I think so. The question is, will Robotaxi earn a fare with no human in the seat, versus will Optimus be put in another factory besides Tesla's, including their suppliers, and generate revenue for that company? It's not as quite as clear because there's nobody actually handing over a check.
I think they have to pay Tesla something. So
you mean actually, but just paying for the bot?
So either paying for the bot or leasing the bot.
I don't know. I mean, that feels like paying for full self-driving. Let's just say doing something useful for somebody besides Tesla. So in other words, it could be a tier 1 supplier, and it moves apart from here to here. That is something that company is
might happen next week.
Pardon me?
That might be easy, because that might happen next week.
I think that the likelihood, if you really reduce it that much, is that Optimus will make money first. I think it's going to be probably 2 years, at least 18 months before full self-driving is allowed to do something all on its own.
Yeah, I'm kind of at that number. Around 18 months would be my thinking. Maybe 24, maybe even 48, but 18 is kind of my minimum. I think it'll be in some state or some country first. So my guess is Arizona, Nevada, or Florida says we want to go first, and we get our test rollout there. And that'll be some weeks after Elon Musk says FSD can be handled from your back seat. So, So I'm thinking 18 months, could be sooner, but that's what I'm thinking as well. But Scott?
So you're thinking FSD, Robotaxi makes the revenue first, or Optimus?
Robotaxi revenue is probably 18 months.
Right. At least. So when I was thinking the answer to this, one of it was looking at it from the technology standpoint and when they're going to be there. And yesterday, when I was on Spaces, there was a question about Tesla getting into prosthetics and whether they would do that. And then I was thinking about it. Then someone brought up like FDA approval. It's too hard. I'm like, oh yeah, FDA, FAA, NHTSA. Once they're involved, forget it. It's the only question whether OSHA is going to come in here and try to put a stop to Optimus.
Crap!
I think it's more likely from a regulatory standpoint that Optimus is able to pull something like that off before that. And so we can look at it a couple ways. Right now, has FSD made money for Tesla, or is it still a sinkhole on R&D? I mean, there are some people that have paid for it, but the question is it kind of losing money internally? Whether we're talking about whether it has generated revenue, but I think it's cost more. I think if you want to look at it another way, I think Optimus, whatever the R&D that goes into Optimus, it will recover that faster through the revenue savings before FSD. So that's the first way I'd look at it. So if you want to do all the accounting tricks of, how things are done, or like moving money from this budget to that budget. But then the other question is, which is actually making external revenue first. I think Optimus could. It's just a question of whether Tesla will allow it. Whether they decide that, no, we really don't want to release it yet. We still want to use it internally a little bit longer, but it's clearly going to be leased. It won't be sold for the longest time.
I think the majority of everybody agrees with you on that. And I think because we think that Elon and his team are smart, we really believe this, or we wouldn't be so heavily invested. And why would you sell it if you can lease it for $100,000 a year? And if you don't want to just feel like the biggest, what do you want to call it, profiteer of all time, you could lease it for $50,000 a year. Yep. And manufacturers would just be bowing down and calling you blessed for doing that.
And there's no lease to own, just like Model 3, right, John?
Yeah, that was actually, we were really strongly considering leasing the Model 3, and we decided we were going to have to buy it because we were like, wait, we don't want to not have the car after 3 years. So yeah.
So John, there was a story that we were going to tell the other day on why you weren't here, and we decided to let you tell it instead of us. Go ahead.
Oh gosh, about the car?
No, why we weren't able to book you on Saturday.
Yeah. That was about the car. So it all had to do with April 1st, which, April Fools, but apparently the IRS is going to pull an April Fool's Day joke on all of us and get rid of the $7,500 tax credit for the Model 3 because it's got made in China batteries. So we were like, crap, we really want a Model 3. We want the $7,500 because we're not stupid. And we're like, what is around? And there were two in Atlanta, but they were the wrong color model, things like that. And there was a black one that we wanted in Savannah, which is 4 hours away. So it was suddenly we're just off and running. I just did a video today. People should watch that video. And I talked about our experience because we literally started the process Friday morning. And by 6 o'clock Saturday, we had the car, including the loan, the checking it out, and that was including this crazy drive to get there, right? If we'd happened to live like 30 minutes away, it would have been a much simpler process. So, but I mean, the loan, everything was just all taken care of. And we paid the exact amount of money that was quoted online. Like that was what my video today was about, because the dealership markups right now, when you go to a dealership and they're like, the car is $50,000. And then it's like, oh, but it's 60 because of market adjustments. And then, oh, you're getting underbody protection. And then, oh, you want cup holder protectors. And then, and suddenly the car's 65 grand. And
you did a video on that about Jeep or somebody, right?
Yeah, I did. And then today I just talked about that again because I don't know if you guys watch Car Questions Answered, but Brandon's amazing. And he was talking about that he went to a Ford dealership that I couldn't tell honestly if it was an F-150 Lightning or a Mach-E, but it was listed as MSRP at $42,000. The actual price was $76,900. Holy $76,600 or something. Yeah, it was $35,000 market adjustment, which is approaching half the cost of the vehicle. So,
all right, John, you have 4 minutes. When you decide that you're done, just check out, and Scott and I will just continue if there's more to say. But John, what would be the limiting factors? Now, I'm going to go back to my theory on this, which my theory is it's got to be either sold or leased to another party. So what would limit, what would stop, what would keep them from being able to do that tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now, 6 months from now? What do you see that could get in the way of getting that done?
Well, I think when Scott mentioned OSHA, I was like, but here's the advantage that robots have over cars is you can put them in a cage. So the first instance of Optimus, almost definitely will be behind some safety barrier, because it's going to take a long time to get OSHA approval to have this thing interact with humans in that much of a way. But it could be done tomorrow. I mean, they've got prototypes out there. Who knows that they don't actually, I don't think they'd be charging their customer, but they could be going to one of their suppliers and saying, can we test it in your mine or in your refining facility or in your widget building facility? Could we test it here? I don't know that they would have done that yet, but there's no reason why they can't do that immediately as long as they take reasonable precautions. to put it in its own little box so that it can't possibly hurt something.
Right. Scott?
I think they will make revenue on Optimus before they do Robotaxi.
Okay. And
I don't know when, but I think it's more likely that it will happen there first.
And limiting factors that you see that would keep them from doing it sooner rather than later?
Technological escape, I think. It's just they decide that they want to keep it internal and they don't want it out. So I think that's going to be the real barrier, is the decision of, is it really ready? And do they have the capability to control it when they get it out there? Because they are leasing it, so you would assume that there might be some Tesla personnel that are there to oversee the operations to make sure it's used correctly. Because their biggest fear could be if something goes wrong and someone gets hurt, it's like, oh, the lawsuit. So I guess the obstacle is legal. Right. If it's not OSHA, it's going to be legal.
So you basically, if you think in terms of a factory, which I think about a lot, is in terms of the factory. Another thing that has really impacted me over these last 3 weeks is this idea that it isn't that hard to build this thing. That I sent you, Scott, a note the other day and asked the question, how, if you have the legs and the arms and the hands and everything just sitting around and they've been building them, multiples of them, how long would it take to assemble one? And your answer, I think, was half a day.
Oh, you said if they already have the arms and the legs, well, then it's faster than that.
You think you would
half a day to almost put the whole thing together if you've got all the pieces.
So if you had the parts just scattered around on tables, and one person over here doing the arms and another person doing the legs, somebody doing the hands, somebody doing the head.
No, just one person doing it all.
Okay, yeah.
Because you asked me man days.
Man days, yeah, and you said half.
You said man days, so yeah. So I said basically, if you have everything just kind of laid out right there, it's like it comes as a kit. Oh, okay, some assembly required, and you go ahead and do it. And I'll assume that the hand is already, because the hand might be the one that takes a little bit longer. So like the hands can pre-assemble and the head kind of comes pre-assembled, but everything else is you've just got all the servos and you got a bag with nuts and bolts in it. And you got your little IKEA tools that you need here and there for the hex wrench. So you get everything the right size and the instructions, and everything is just laid out. I think you can do it in half a day.
John, in your last minute.
I have to, I'll have to give that one to Scott because I just don't know enough. No. I'm just saying I just don't have the experience of building things in that sort of environment. So it's what he's saying sounds completely reasonable. I mean, ultimately, it's got to get down to just minutes per robot if you want to make millions to billions of them, right? So if you're talking 10 people building it, something along those lines, and that's the organization, and you have most of the people are putting together the parts, and then just a couple of people at the end are like, screw the stuff in and off it goes. So yeah.
All right. So that's not a limiting factor. Well, John, we'll let you go because you got a class to teach.
Yep.
So thank you again for being here.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the rest of the conversation. I'll watch it online. There you go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye. Subscribe.
Yep. Bye, John.
All right, Scott. So the limiting factor that you and I talked about the other day, and I'm going to forget actually what your response was, which is sad. I think it might have been, well, you just tell us again. So in the big spaces thing that we did, the big conversation around what was limiting all of this from happening tomorrow was balance and hands. Did you add Did you add the third thing?
Yeah, I think part of it was it needs to walk a little bit better.
Okay,
so
but that's balance, right? Is that balance?
Yeah, the balance, the balance, the improvement of the walking and being able to walk with loads. So everyone's just talking about, the balance is pretty hard. And we've seen that even Boston Dynamics has a hard time.
Right.
And they showed it in the outtakes that the control systems that's be able to react to balance is not quite there. And so it really comes down to two things. One is are the control algorithms good enough to understand that and sort of be able to tell when things are out of balance? And it's always a problem that these are heuristically written algorithms that just are not good enough. And then there's the other aspect is whether mechanically it has everything it needs to be able to to react quick enough. Because we know when we fall over, we have these fast twitch muscles that just react, that just to make sure, and it's an instinct. You're not even aware of suddenly your leg kind of goes out and you do all these other things really quickly. And at that point, it really is a reflex reaction. So that is not even going all the way up to your brain and back down to your legs. It's something that's down, I think in your lower spine, somewhere around there, that will sort of give you that reflex reaction to keep you from being able to fall. And the question is like, do you have rapid enough response in that to tell when you're tipping? And then are the servos, do they have enough oomph to be able to kind of do that to fight it? And the thing is, a lot of times when you're fighting something, I think you've seen this, is that you react and then you put too much into it. And now suddenly you're causing like, something worse. And now you got to react to that reaction. And then you got to like bring yourself back and then finally stabilize it.
Sounds
and
like
the Artemis, the Artemis robot, you saw that.
It sounds like you were just talking about the U.S. economy with the Fed reacting.
Oh, yeah. And if you look at the Romello videos that they have with their Artemis robot, where they were pushing it to fall over, I mean, you would sort of notice that as it fell over, it wasn't like it caught its balance in one step. It caught it in a couple, because it did a little bit to start to break the fall, but it's still falling, and so then it's going to do a little bit more, and that's showing how a good control system kind of catches the fall. And you'll see like skiers. I think it's like Bodie Miller was famous for having these wipeouts where he never wiped out, where he was just like this constant kind of fall that was going on, that he was just like reacting. He kind of picked him up from that fall, but it caused him to fall again. But then he reacts again and again, and somehow makes it down the mountain and gets like a silver medal somehow. So we see this a lot, and how we're able, and there's a lot to reacting to it, and whether the robots can do that quick enough.
So Scott, it was Artemis. Was Artemis in those videos? And it'd be great if we actually had those videos running right now. But when Artemis is falling and reacting, is it falling and reacting based on hardwired programming, or is it learning?
I'm not sure. It may be that they have a good control system around there. So I think they do have some sort of learning system. The question is whether it's a neural network in the controller. So there is probably something on top of that, but it could also be done just from a control systems standpoint, that you've written a good enough algorithm to do it. So the idea is that it's able to keep itself balanced pretty well, but then you have a perturbation that just kind of comes from out of nowhere, that you get shoved, and now you've got to react to that. And depending on how you hit, you're going to decide, do I throw my leg back, or do I throw it to the side, or what's the best way to react? And of course, the best way to react is just machine learning. Just keep on teaching it, and then you sort of learn what is the best way to respond to that. And when the whole control system becomes a neural net, I mean, this is the difference with FSD. FSD version 11 is now like all nets, and you can just see the difference. You can just see the difference and how smooth and more human-like it is. When those control systems have that will solve a lot of the balance problem. And part of the reason you do it is the heuristics have a hard time figuring out what's the best way to coordinate all the servos. So in this case, we have 28 actuators, and we really need to coordinate the motions of all of them to find what's the optimum use of it. And what will happen is you'll say, oh, just move the legs. So you're only thinking about, I'm just going to move the leg over here. So, well, when you do that, you got to think about the pelvis. When you do the pelvis, you got to start thinking about the torso, and also what your arms are going to, they're all part of the solution. And the thing is, they get kind of ignored, or it's like, well, I'm just going to solve that part of the problem, and then after I've solved that, I'll kind of focus on these others. But the thing is that it's holistic, and only a neural network can really take that into account. So the whole body will react to falling, not just one or two legs. Everything is going to be in play.
So technically, if Optimus is hooked up to a neural net, you could do all of the methods for training. Mm-hmm. Like you could have a human that's hooked up to wires that is doing those falls and doing the best possible reaction mm-hmm. to those falls. You could have what do you call it? The simulations that would be repeating the thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. And you could also just have the bot itself learning as it goes.
Yes. They've already done that. So they are doing the simulations of the bot learning to walk. So the nets are trying to learn how to coordinate everything to do the walking, but it's doing in a simulated environment with simulated physics.
Right.
And then they have to start taking it out to the real world and then get that data. And that's why I was saying earlier, well, it wasn't in this video, it was in one previous. I'm not sure if this is going to be the third video, because this is going to be a long one, trust me. So they just need the miles, or the feet, whatever you want to think about it in this case. And you just have to have a lot of Optimi running around to understand what the physics is like, doing it on different surfaces and comprehending and understanding these different surfaces. And it's better to do it not with one bot, but with many bots, for one very simple reason, is that you can never build two bots identical. So if all your training data is on one bot, then you've overfit to that bot. You have to overfit to that fleet. Mm-hmm. It has to understand. Now, we are very good at that. You might think, well, you don't have to do that. I learned to walk all by myself and it wasn't as a result of anyone else. He says, but your body's been changing like every day. When you get up in the morning, some of your muscles are weaker or stronger than they were the day before, or you've worked out and now you're getting bulk, or you've had an injury or something like that. And your body is able to accommodate, because the neural network understands that system that it's learning to walk in keeps on changing. So you have kind of this basic understanding, but it's able to accommodate to the changes. And that's what you need to do with Optimus. You need to make sure that the neural network is able to walk for the entire fleet, and not just for the gold standard version of Optimus, which is what's coming out of the simulator right now. So you need to get that breadth to make sure it actually understands what it means to walk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's okay. So if it learns to walk, and it learns to walk well enough to handle 30% of factory situations, mm-hmm. And it can be built easily, and probably, as we've just talked about in another video, I think we talked about the fact it might be certainly under $10,000 to build these things, maybe as low as $6,000 or $5,000. The hands then become that other limiting factor. But your statement was in this video, that last video that we did on, I think it was put up on Wednesday, and the video that we had the week before, is that the hands are being compensated for by the brain. So these hands as they are today may be good enough. There may not be super strong reasons for improving the hands. And or maybe part two of that question is, if they were to improve them, what would they need to improve?
Well, maybe there's a couple other little sensors they need down there, but I don't think they need them. So I really do think they are good enough. And part of my thinking was this paper that John and I were referring to from OpenAI about the hand that was able to do the Rubik's Cube. Mm-hmm. And while that hand is good, it's not great. It still doesn't have everything a human has, yet it was doing some pretty amazing things. And part of it's also tied with the vision system and some other stuff, but it's just remarkable what they could do. And I think they were even shocked with what they were able to get out of that. And what they were saying was like some amount of emergent behaviors that they were not expecting. And they're also finding that it's good to have like a lot of noise in your system as opposed to having everything perfect. And again, the problem is they could only get so far in simulation, and then they had to actually go out there and do it in reality. But they learned a lot of different kind of techniques to randomize the data trials that they were going through that allowed it to really be able to handle that. So yeah, Optimus will be able to do quite a bit. I'll keep on saying, well, maybe it can't fold your clothes, but I might change my mind on that, because something just was sent out the other day from Stanford of showing it's a teleoperated robot. So they have a human operator that actually is like moving some things around to move it, trying to teach a neural network to do, or I guess get the inputs. And then from that, the robotic system would probably figure out the rest of what it's supposed to do. And it's remarkable. I mean, they were just showing all kinds of random tasks that you could not believe could be done. I mean, some of them were just, one of them was, putting a twist tie on something. Yeah. Another was like zippering up a hoodie, placing a bunch of things. And one of them was like taking a stack of cups, and then like not only taking them off the stack, but then making a pyramid out of them. And it's like, oh, I mean, that is requires, you think it requires an incredible amount of dexterity. It just needs, it's more a precision problem than it is dexterity, because it really was just pinchers it had. It didn't have a full hand. That was the whole point. As you look at it, I go, that's mechanically not very sound. It's not the best gripper and everything. And they're like, yep. And look at what we can do with that. So
yeah. And we also have to assume that the roboticists, the robotic engineers that are working in Tesla on this project right now are top drawer, and there's dozens of them. These are top guys and gals, and there's dozens of them. Plus there's that guy over at UCLA, I guess that they have a contract with
Dennis Hong. Yep.
Dennis Hong. So these folks know about, between them and among them, they know about every hand that is being built right now, and every finger that's being built, and every foot that's being built. They know it far better than we do. And
they've read those papers.
They've read those papers, and they've read the papers that are probably not even out yet. They're watching stuff that's happening in labs across the country that people are interacting with them about what's going on. So if they think that this hand right now is adequate, it's probably because they've really carefully thought through all the options that are on the table.
They thought a lot through. And again, the idea of this started maybe 2 years ago. And then, they really started building something a little over a year ago. And the amount of thought that went into it, every time I'm looking at it, it's like they really thought it through. I can see that it wasn't something that they just came up with yesterday, but there was like a long thought process, and they're really hitting all the milestones and everything they want really quite well. So yeah, some good thought has gone into it, as well as, research is there. What's the best way to solve something? So they have what are, so very clever, nice solutions to things that maybe they didn't invent, but they have seen out there, or other examples. Like, I love the way they kind of solve the wrists and the feet, the ankles. And there are other examples like that. So it's not like they have a patent or invented something like that, but still there are these incredible ideas that they've kind of come up with, or let's say that they've taken and realized what's the best way to apply them. And so every step of the way, really good design choices, great minimization of what needs to be done to come up with a really optimal design. And what I've said before is that, the human hand and brain co-evolved. So, as our hands get a bit more dexterous, our brains got a little bit smarter, and then our brains sort of forced a little bit more out of our hands. So they got a little bit better. We got more nerve endings in there and everything else. And so that's really the thing that's keeps it from being able to be absolutely ready. And then the walking, but they have a lot of it down. I think right now it's just that they need enough real world experience, because you can already see from the simulator that what they can do, and it's quite adequate. And let's remember, they are saying 5 miles per hour max. So it does not have to do sprinting or anything else, just 5 miles per hour. Now, to put that in concept, 5 miles per hour is really a very brisk walk. I mean, how many of you can actually walk 5 miles in an hour? Most people, the average speed is 3. Sometimes you can go 4. If you're going 4, that's already a pretty hard walk. And you're not required to run that fast in a factory. So in a factory setting, 3 miles per hour, it probably already will be pretty fast for a lot of things. Right. The only people that go faster than 3 miles per hour in the factory is when they're heading off to lunch. Okay. The rest of the time, it's going to be less than that. And then, especially if you've got a heavy load or anything like that. So the walk just has to be good enough to be able to do that. And we see that they're already figuring out how to do it, and everything is in the design. So it's there. It's just that it's becoming unlocked, some of these capabilities, as they understand a bit better how it's going to work. So I'm pretty confident they'll have all those pieces going, if not already.
All right. Last question for this segment. We don't want to debate John in absentia, but
he's wrong.
but he became he lost his cool when he started thinking about the idea that OSHA might come in and get in the way of the Optimus robot. I would assume that in what you've been doing for the last 30 years or so, that you've been in front of OSHA a lot, or you've had to at least negotiate or with
not me personally, but of course, a lot of my customers that are putting the factories together, and a lot of it comes down to, of course, the safety standards that are there that have been developed by the RIA, which looks at what are the safe ways to be able to set up robotic cells and what are the kind of the safeguards they want to have in there. And so they're all kind of compliant with that. And I'm not sure how much of them are just OSHA regs versus ones that the industry has sort of developed that OSHA said, oh, okay, that's good. Oh, so yeah. I don't think it would be a big problem.
And insurance companies love to come in. And
that'll be the other thing is, so the insurance.
So overall, though, as you look at Optimus today, based on all those years of experience and as a factory guy who had to deal with OSHA, do you think that OSHA will have major concerns, or do you think it's pretty easy to fence the robot in, maybe even not physical barriers, maybe they're electronic barriers? I mean, what do you think?
Okay. What there will be is that the RIA acts kind of like as UL Labs, so if you want to sell an appliance or something like that, you take it to UL, and once it becomes UL approved, it's like, oh, okay, you can sell it. So add the same kind of standard for a cobot. So you have to go through and meet certain standards in order for it to be certified a cobot. And if they do that, they will probably be okay.
Define cobot.
A cobot is a collaborative robot. So it's a portmanteau of collaborative and robot. So, and they're different than the industrial robots. So industrial robots are the big Kukas and Faniks that we see out there that you don't want to get anywhere near. They're flying hunks of metal. They go very fast, and they are deadly. The idea of a cobot is it can't hurt you. It can it can maybe bruise you. That's about it, but it's not going to kill you. So they're kind of soft and cuddly, and they're designed to work in an environment next to humans. And so they have a couple of ways of operating. One is that if they can tell there's no one nearby, they actually work really hard. It's not like, it's like, oh, the boss isn't around, I guess I'll go slow. It's like, hey, the boss isn't around, I can go fast. And then when the human starts to get close by, then they will slow down a little bit just to make sure they don't get hurt. But they have very soft, they don't have any edges, literally. They don't have any pinch points. They are compliant in that if it comes down and hits you, you can take that arm and just push it out of the way. Whereas industrial robot, when it comes down and stops, it's locked in place and you cannot move it out of the way. So there's all these things about a cobot that it's just not going to hurt you. It's not really big. It's not really fast. And there's a certification standard for that would allow that. And that's what Optimus will have to do. And there's probably a few changes I think they would have to make to be able to do it. And then there's going to be this other thing is that all cobots, all robots up till now, you have the mobile robots, these little platforms that go around. They also have to kind of have some sort of standards and safeguards around there. I mean, they have the kind of like a virtual bumper around them that if a person steps in front, whoop, it'll stop right away to make sure they don't bump it in. And of course, they don't have any sharp edges and they don't go very fast and everything else. The thing with Optimus is it's like the first time you have a combination of an arm that's walking around and thinking of like, oh, wait a minute, how do we treat that? Because the cobot is bolted down. It's not going to tip over and fall on someone. It's there, it might swing around and hit you, but that's about it. But now Optimus either, inadvertently or, intentionally can fall over. So, a person could just like push on Optimus and then goes, and then it's going to fall on someone. Now, it only weighs about 125 pounds. And I think that's correct. Now, that was the stated goal. If you look at one of the slides from AI Day 2, some people get misled. They think it's 73 kilograms, which is way more. So 125 pounds is about 57 kilograms. They were talking about the human body. The average human body or something like that is like 73. So it's not that. So it's much lighter. I've got the spreadsheet adding everything up and that it comes right in and right around there. So they're close. If they're off maybe 5 pounds. So hopefully, yeah, that's kind of heavy. I wouldn't want to have that much falling on me, but it's kind of, this going to be this little puddle or something. It's probably a little bit lighter than having Atlas falling on you. So that's going to be the one concern is how stable is it and how often does it just spontaneously fall over? And normally you talk about something that in these standard terms is like mean time between failure. But the other day on Twitter Spaces, Metaphor just was like talking about this thing. It was like, the time to fall over. And he was using it a few times. I was like, I'd never heard that term. So I wrote it down and asked him, I said, Matt, where did you get this? He says, oh, I just made it up. Oh, it's great, And so I think the idea is that what we're going to have are walking robots. If we really have this thing called a time to fall over, TTFO, and that when it exceeds a certain amount, then it's got the rating. It's like, oh, it's okay to be out around humans because it falls over less than a drunk does, I guess, in Athens, Georgia on a Saturday night, according to John. So.
All right. I lied. I have one more question.
Okay.
So going back to the beginning of this video, we were talking about how easy it is and how fast an individual robot could be built. My sense of, we talked about this in another video a couple, I think last week. Mm-hmm. I was in the water bottle business. There's one sitting on the shelf down there. We didn't ramp water bottles. I mean, when you built the mold and you started the plastic flowing through, it either worked or it didn't, and you went to full production. So there's no such thing as a ramp. A car, you have massive fit issues and whether the paint dries. And I mean, who knows? I can't even imagine.
You have all these workers that have to be trained up. I mean,
workers that have to be trained, everything else. I have to think that the ramp on the robot is someplace in between, but way closer to the water bottle. Is that?
Oh, it's way closer. I think it's way closer. So, the example I was talking about, you just kind of lay everything out and some assembly required. The first time you're going to be, I'm not quite sure. And of course, the industrial engineers are going to go down and they're going to look at what's the best order of operations to do these different things. And once they kind of worked it out and they just do a little bit of training and a person's put one or two of these robots together, then they're up and going. It really, I think it's going to be fast. Now, whether you have like one guy assembling the whole thing, that may not be the most efficient use. You're going to have some division of labor.
Right.
But I could easily see that. And I don't know if you need like 10 people or whether it's going to be 5 people, depending upon some of the different aspects. It could even be a smaller number. But in the end, each person would be able to produce 2 robots a day. So if you have a 10-person crew, you should be expecting at least them to be able to assemble 20 bots a day.
Right.
With just that crew.
Yeah. And
that doesn't include everything that's behind it to putting the servos together, but just right there in final assembly, easily.
Yeah. But, and the rest of it is all plastic parts and metal parts that can be produced by the millions.
Those are cranked out pretty quickly. And then you bring them in and then at some point, you may be automating that a little bit more. So, okay, if we're saying, and of course we could scale that up really easy. It's like it doesn't have to be 10 people. We could get 100 people, and then we're going to be producing. It doesn't have to be people.
It could be bots.
Yeah, we're going to be pretty. Yeah, but if we can't do it with bots because we don't have the bots yet, we got to build them.
Yeah,
and they're worth more over in the Tesla factory than they are building the bots. Okay, so they're going out over there for now. It's like let's wait till we have the surplus. So if you're looking at that, we've got 100 people. We could be doing 200 a day, but let's just say it's a crew of 10. Because that's as fast as that we can produce, the servos or some of the other parts. Maybe there's something that's limiting that. So how many can you produce in a year?
Well, and that was assuming a shift, right? That wasn't even a day.
Yeah. So that would be so one day, one shift, 8 hours. So that's 20. So maybe 40 in a day if you want to run 3 shifts. Do the math. I'm really bad at this.
40 times
20 times 20 is like 400 a month. So yeah, it was 4,000. I mean, you could easily have a ramp up of what, 5? Is it 5,000 a year? Or am I off by a factor of 10 there somewhere?
I think you might be off by the factor of 10 is always the thing that throws me. So what's 40 times 365? Yeah.
12,000. Are we up around 12,000, something like that?
12,000.
12,000 just with
12,000. Yeah.
With a skeleton crew, if you want to call it.
Right. But I'm just saying, in order to go from there to 1 million a year, you're really just looking at.
Yeah, you're going to need a lot more. Yeah, you're going to need much bigger teams. Or at that point, you start coming in with some other forms of automation that snap those things in really quick.
All right. Hey, Scott, it's been great. I always love to be right, but the proof is going to be in the pudding. We'll see whether all of our speculation, all of our connecting the dots, all of our analysis turns out to be what Tesla actually does. But it'll be fun to watch and fun to see our stock go nuts if we're right. All right. Yep. Thanks again for being here. This is Randy Kirk. Be sure to follow Scott on Twitter. Be sure to follow me and John on Twitter and Patreon and YouTube and all the rest. And as usual, it's been great talking to you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.